Well, Anita, I'm so excited to have you here today to have this conversation because I've witnessed this huge transformation in you and in your life and your business. So I'm wondering if you just start by maybe telling a little bit of your story about how you got where we are today and the things you were struggling with and how that journey has developed for you. And I know you can offer some encouragement to people. So that's what I'm.
Yeah, we've got right. Thanks for having me today. It's such an honor to spend time with you and to be able to speak to your audience and help them and just meet them right where they're at. So kind of the 100,000 foot view version. So I had been a successful corporate executive in the software space and decided through that process, we started homeschooling our kids, and I really had a heart to homeschool my kids and stay home with them. So a little while, I had an opportunity to retire real young and very early and then come home with my kids full time. And that was an incredible season. It was a hard season for me because after having just a great amount of success and having like the title and the money and the accolades and reaching a pivotal point in my career, where honestly, I felt like I was kind of choked out. And I remember distinctly feeling in those days, kind of like reaching to this pinnacle and looking around going, is this it? This can't possibly be it. Saying a whole bunch of expletives in my mind and thinking, oh my gosh, I am not happy. Okay. So then I transitioned into homeschooling my kids full time, and my husband and I were on board. Like for us as homeschoolers, we feel like that's where God called us. We want to be obedient to that. Super fruitful for a lot of years. And then about 5 years ago, I kind of started getting restless. Like as my kids started getting older and the demands of homeschooling started to let up, then I looked at my husband, Vince, and I was like, I feel like I need to do something. Like I don't want to go back to the 40 or 80-hour work week, which I had done for a lot of years. And so I started kind of dabbling around in a bunch of different ways, meaning like I miss being a business owner. I had owned a software company with partners before, and that was kind of like the only thing in my career that I really missed. So I started looking, and I knew that it wasn't really like a good fit for me to go back to like full-time employment. That was not, I think, because we were not going to give up homeschooling in the midst of this. So I started an Amazon business, and that was fun until it wasn't. So, and had things like, you have product in warehouses, then COVID-19 shuts the whole world down and all the warehouses are all shut down. We can't even like stock any more products in warehouses and all this kind of stuff. And really long story short, what I found that inventory business for me, it's in a great business model. And I know a lot of friends that are super successful with their Amazon businesses in lots of ways. But I found like it wasn't really the right thing for me. The other thing that was happening in the midst of that is I was starting to really kind of dig into like what was important to me. What were some markers of like quote unquote success? How could I do some of the things that I want and make some money that I wanted to, but then also homeschool my kids and not feel like I had to go out and, travel a full week of work like I used to do as a consultant, but still be available and present to my kids. So I had like basically a list of things that were like my non-negotiables, right? The kind of the income that I needed to make, how I wanted to be intentional with raising my kids, and things we wanted to do in our marriage and that kind of stuff. So in that journey, it was kind of a longer journey, but I ended up discovering that really like coaching was that's my jam. And I started realizing through that process, kind of dabbling in it a little bit and starting discovering like, I've actually been coaching for a long time, like as a teacher previously in the corporate space, not an educational teacher. And then of course, homeschooling my kids, started looking around going, oh, I'm kind of already doing this. Somewhere in that process, you and I had a conversation, and it was one of the most transformational conversations I think I'd ever had with anybody, because you acknowledged, Anita, you've already been doing some of these things for like 20 years. We broke down some of the pieces of where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do. And in a really short period of time, Ray, succinctly, you were able to look at me and encourage me and say, I can see where you want to go. And I can see that you have the drive to be able to do that. But I also want to encourage you and say, you've already been doing these things. Like you already have a history of that. So one of the things that I like to do in my business is I spend time with successful corporate women of faith and help them to take their specialized knowledge and turn that into a consulting business. And that conversation that you and I had really flipped a switch in me that said, oh my gosh, I can totally do this. And like, not only can I totally do this, but like, I can totally rock this because I had somebody else in you that saw the value in me and be like, oh my gosh, she's like really amazing at this kind of stuff. So we kind of started, moving on that process and going down that path. And then about a year ago, it's been a little bit over a year. It was right before Easter last year. My husband was hospitalized. Went in for like an outpatient procedure, ended up in the emergency room about an hour later. And then while he was in the hospital, like great timing, he lost his job. So we went from his income and a tiny little bit of my income, which was not enough to sustain our household, to no income. And then, of course, as you're in the hospital, if anybody's been in that environment, they know, like, you walk out of there with a gigantic bill.
Yeah.
Even when you've been in there. So yeah, Vince was hospitalized for several days, and that was a huge wake-up call for us. I can remember in the midst of that, a couple of things were going on. I was reaching out to friends that I knew and loved and praying and trying to, we're trying to like organize all these things. So let me just back up and say, by the time Vince was in the hospital, we'd already started repairing our marriage and working on that and going to counseling and starting to get our relationship back on track and our communication to be better. So, but it was literally about, I don't know, I try to forget some of the details sometimes, maybe about a 6 to 8 week window in which those things happen.
I remember that. It was a very tough time.
It was radically hard. Like I remember you called me and you said, I don't know what's going on, but I feel like the Holy Spirit said your family's under attack. And I distinctly remember looking at my children and saying, like, no matter what, we're going to figure this out and we're going to be okay. Like, I'm not sure what Dad's going to do at that point, but we're going to be totally okay. And looking them straight in the eye and being like, Mom's going to figure this out. And no matter what, we're going to be fine. And their countenance had immediately changed because my kids knew when Mom says something, man, something's going to happen. If she says we're going to be okay, then they already knew because they had the habit of looking at them and telling them and showing them over and over and over again. When Mom says something, it's going to happen no matter what. Like, I don't know how it's going to happen. I know that I don't, but I do know that I don't have to worry about it. And I could tell the look on their face, like, had shifted immediately. So then I kind of went to work and it was like, shoot, now I got to figure this out. What am I going to do?
Yeah, you're definitely a person who lives out, let your yes be yes and your no be no. I know the same thing about you. When you say something's going to happen, it's going to happen.
It's being a person of integrity is one of my core values. And we talk about that a lot as a household. Like, whatever you say you're going to do, like that's it. Because really all I have are my words. I got to start with my words. Those are one of the most important things in my life, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a principle that I do my best to live by. It's being impeccable with your word.
Yeah.
And that word impeccable, if you look up the etymology of it, it really comes down to saying, don't sin with your word. So if you say something, you better mean it.
Even if you say it by mistake.
Yes.
Sometimes we do that too, right? And this is not about perfection. It's about what we're talking about today. Just to reset the stage here, we're just talking about progress. That's all.
Yeah.
Going through the progress of what life looks like in the ups and the downs. And everybody's journey looks a little bit different, right?
That's so important, though. I want to come back to progress in just a moment.
Yeah.
Something that I've run into as I'm doing some of these conversations is I'm remembering that, like many other folks, you came to our coaching program and our mastermind through the avenue of copywriting.
Yeah.
Which is,
that's right.
It's funny to me how many people come in for the copywriting and they stay. First, there's so much more going on because we support our people where we get together as much as possible, online and offline. Can you speak a little bit about what was it about copywriting that drew you in. How important do you feel like that is to your business and in other areas, if it is?
Yeah. So I first got introduced to you, Ray, through another mutual friend of ours, Dan Warheide, and I had really not even been exposed to the Ray Edwards world at all. I had been in a different community with Dan, and I think I probably read, probably here in my bookshelf somewhere, I read your copywriting book. And when you essentially the idea that everything that we say and do, everything that we say, all words, all videos, everything is all copy. I was like, that's kind of intriguing. And truth be told, like I didn't set out to be a copywriter, but because I love to communicate, and I know that words are super important, it's one of those things that I was able to kind of like unfold the benefit of copywriting in the midst of being in the mastermind. And it actually process of walking through that you walk through people or walk people through to be able to get certified. That process for me was super transformative. It was like a cathartic experience. It helped wake me up to who my audience was, what I was really good at, and what I had to offer, to really put it super just short and sweet. So I actually really, if you remember, I really bucked against the idea of going after the rewriting certification because first I was like, Ray, I don't understand. I'm here for the mastermind to build a business. What's the deal with the copywriting stuff? But when I actually took the time to get into it, it was incredibly helpful and transformational to take me from where I was not able to articulate my audience or my offer, or really kind of for me, it's like, this is the way that I frame it. And anybody, you can use whatever words work for you. I'm going to use words that relate to God because that's who I am. But taking the deep desires that God had put in my heart and creating a business around that so that I could have time and money freedom, that is a process. And it was a process to help me that I walked through in learning about copywriting, to be able to describe what it is, what I do, and how I help other people, and then be able to actually help them in that process.
And you've been a consummate student of that, and you went through that process, bucking against it. I do remember that.
Yeah.
But it's been so fruitful. So could you share a little bit about what your business is now and what you're doing and where you're growing and going? Because that's an inspirational story in itself.
Yeah, sure. So, okay, so this is like on the heels of husband hospitalized, loses a job. So I'll take a step just a second and describe that. So I reached out to some friends that I had in the tech space, because that's where I had come from in my career. Started to apply for some jobs begrudgingly, because let me just be clear, I did not want to go and work full time for somebody else. Because again, I work in a homeschool first and foremost. I ended up, long story short, because of relationship that I'd had with people, I ended up gathering some clients and taking what I call my specialized knowledge. So I had been an executive, and I have a super refined skill set around project management, and specifically project management for like enterprise level projects. So big projects in the software space that are typically over budget or over time. That's my specialized knowledge. So one of the things I love to do is I love to help other successful women of faith that are likely in the corporate space, that have this specialized knowledge. They've grown to a space in their career where they probably have more money than they have time, but they've also reached a pinnacle where they're kind of like, okay, I have this God-sized idea inside of me that's been kind of whispering, maybe now shouting to me, saying, it's time to transition over and do something different. So one of the things that I love to say is, especially if you hang around church at all, like I hear people say all the time, well, I just want to leave my corporate job so I can go do ministry full time. So I don't actually subscribe to that in the manner of like, I don't believe that ministry work means that you don't get paid. I don't see that in scripture myself. I've studied it. I've looked for it. I don't think that's what Jesus modeled at all. And I think he modeled abundance. I think Jesus modeled for us going after the things that we want, because we're serving all of the time and having just great things come back to our households, and then we can share more and do more for the kingdom. That's maybe a different discussion altogether.
Come on. I like it. I love it.
But so I basically have determined that I'm creating a movement of women who are coming together that are going to champion one another, meet each other where they're at. I don't have any tolerance anymore for like complainers or people that aren't going to move forward or not take responsibility for their life. That's not my jam. Those aren't my people, and that's okay. It's those ladies who really want to say, Anita, I have an idea for a business, consulting business where I reallocate my skill set over here, what I'm really, really good at, in a different manner so that I can have more time and money freedom. Because their hearts, honestly, for women, a lot of times, especially in the corporate space, if they're women of faith, they might be going to work crying because they're missing their kids. They might be going to work aching because they're thinking, if I really had just a little bit more time with my husband to work out these problems, or maybe they're on the verge of divorce, or maybe they have this picture in their mind, right, where when they take a step back from work and they sit over a glass of wine or a glass of coffee, and she and I have a conversation and say, you know what, Anita, when I was really little, I wanted to do this. Or, you know what, Anita, like, I'm really good over here, but I want to be able to reapply it in a different way because I'm so tired of a boss telling me what to do. I'm so tired of traveling all the time and missing my kids. Let's just go baseline. If you're working 40 hours a week and you're giving your life away for 40 hours a week to someone else, there's no shame, no condemnation in this, but let me just be clear. My experience has been it's really difficult to then invest in your marriage and invest in your kids and invest in things that are good for your health and your mind and your body and your spirit, because you don't have time to do those things. Yeah. You got to get to a conference call. You got to get to a meeting. You got to get to somebody else's demand or somebody else's schedule that's probably scheduled out 6 or 12 or 18 months out. And like, play dates for your kids, I don't know, let the nanny handle that. Like, that's crazy. So pause there. That's a lot.
That's you've really spoken to the hearts of a lot of women, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And probably some men too.
Yes.
Let's rewind a little bit. Let's go back to the crisis point where Vince is in the hospital and there's all this stuff going on and he lost his job. How have your finances changed between then and now? What do you see for the future?
So financially, we went from not doing that great to taking on a lot of debt because of the hospitalization, to me starting up consulting. I kind of have one umbrella business that has two businesses underneath. There's consulting work that I do for clients because that's what I'm really good at, and I love it. I love showing up and doing my specialized knowledge. It's where my heart really sings. And then I also love coaching other women to do the same thing. Do you know, Ray, when I sat down in crisis mode and I made a list of, Lord, these are the things that I need in order for us to be able to survive. And then, by the way, I'm done just bare bones minimum surviving. These are the things that we need as a family to thrive. And they were not totally financial. A lot of it was time. Just as a homeschooling family, like there were big chunks that were time and money related and health related and all this kind of stuff. And do you know, it's just so good. Our finances took a radical hockey stick up. And that first 6 months of my business last year went up. I don't know. Do you want to talk about dollars here?
Sure.
So we went up, we had an increase of about $160,000 in a 6-month window. And then we had another increase projected out this year, about another $380,000 this year on top of some other stuff we're doing. We had done like Financial Peace University for a lot of years, so we knew how to just tackle the debt. So in a 4-month window, we were also able, because I had some debt in my business because I was in this kind of like getting started mode for a while. And then we had obviously medical debt. We paid off over $40,000 of debt in a 4-month window.
Wow.
Yeah, like radical amounts. So
that sounds like David called that. Sounds like you're doing rice and beans and beans and rice and beans, but you did it.
Yeah. So what was amazing in the midst of that, though, I was still able to homeschool our kids, and we were still able to, because of the abundance coming in and the time there, we were able to give Vince a window of time to just heal, because based on the medical situation and where he was, and he had been, you know how it is with medical stuff. Sometimes you've been driving yourself in the wrong direction for so many years. You don't really, like, just because you end up in the emergency room, sometimes you don't immediately it's a wake up call for sure, but you don't necessarily turn the bus that easily. So he needed time to be able to heal. And we are just, I mean, he tells me all the time, babe, I'm so grateful for what you do, because you've allowed me to do what I can do now. And can I tell you, like, his relationship with me and with our kids has never been better, because he's had the gift of time to be able to spend with them and with me with a completely different perspective.
And I have seen that. I can give testimony to the truth of that. In fact, it's been so amazing because you became part of our mastermind group, and the things you've been saying about yourself, I've seen you demonstrate as you just naturally start coaching people in the group and helping them and inspiring them to new levels of achievement. It's a beautiful thing. And then Vince came to one of the meetings, and then now he's in the mastermind.
Yeah.
And it's been just a glorious thing seeing him. I feel like wake up and come to life and start being who he really is on the inside. It's been a fun journey.
I know. It's so fun to watch. You know, he'd spent so many years kind of not really knowing what he wanted to do. He was in a career that was basically demanded to him by his father, and to see him be in a season. This is the way that he described it. He goes, "It's like I'm a bear waking up from hibernation, and yeah, like all this energy and excitement is stirring inside me." He's always been a really happy-go-lucky kind of guy, but now it's connected to purpose.
Yes.
Oh, it's like now he's on fire. So cool to see that. It's amazing.
Love that. So before we officially started, we were talking before we turned on the recording.
Yeah.
Can you say a few words? You were talking about the gap and the gain and progress. Let's come back to that.
I would openly admit that for most of my life, especially in the midst of having corporate experience, corporate success, corporate wins, corporate losses, all that kind of stuff, being super goal oriented, all that kind of stuff, I would say now I can look back and say, I have spent a big chunk of my life in my mindset thinking that I will be happy when something else happens. I'll be happy when I reach the goal. I'll be happy when this financial breakthrough happens. I'll be happy when I buy a new car. I'll be happy. And you could go all the way down in my list. I'll be happy when I get married or kids, or most everything in my life, in my mind, to simplify it and to really just be super transparent about it. My thought process was, I'll be happy when. But the problem with that is that it's always out of reach. And you spend your life like grasping for these things that never really come to fruition, because even when you reach the goal, then the next goal comes into place.
That's right.
So that's how I was as an employee. And then you shift gears to be an entrepreneur, and it's pervasive in the entrepreneur community. We're kind of the worst at it, really, because as entrepreneurs, I might say, well, my goal is to do X. It doesn't really matter what your goal is. And then you're almost to the goal, and one of two things happen. Either you compare yourself to somebody else in a similar space that probably has 10 more years or whatever experience than you, and yet for some silly reason, your brain goes, oh, but look what they're doing. I'm not there yet. Then I'm going to move my goals out a little bit farther to push myself a little bit harder. I needed something to be different in my life.
Yeah.
And like, where's the joy in that, right? Is if I always need something, then I'm always scrambling to get that something that I've told myself that I really need. See, there's a huge difference between need and a want.
Yes.
And if I need something, then sometimes I'm going to go after it so dramatically that I'm going to miss all the good things that are in my life. And so what you and I have been talking about lately, and just this concept that, is it Dan Sullivan? Dan Sullivan talks about is the gap and the gain. And so like hats off to him and Benjamin Hardy.
Hardy.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's it.
Able to articulate and help us to see, oh my gosh, if I spend that's what the book refers to as the gap. If I'm always feeling like there's not enough, and I'm in a gap, I'm like in this lack mindset or the gap mindset or whatever, however you want to phrase it, it doesn't matter. But if I'm able to shift that around and realize, like, dang it, look how far I've come.
Yes, that's so important because as entrepreneurs, like you were talking about earlier, our tendency is to look to the goal and just constantly make ourselves aware of the gap between where we are and where we want to be,
Yeah.
instead of being grateful, just looking and realizing, look how far we've come,
Yeah.
all we have. And when you get into that state, then it shifts. You're no longer achieving to be happy. You are happily achieving.
Yeah.
And that's such a huge shift that it's not obvious in the beginning, but once you wrap your mind around it, you can figure out nothing out there somewhere on the horizon is ever going to make me happy.
Right.
I got to start by being happy where I am.
So you know this, Ray, like my mornings always look like I spend time in the Word to recalibrate my mind and my heart all the time. And then I walk so that I can pray. And as I was walking and praying this morning, I realized that I was in the gap. And so I kind of reset myself and I was like, okay, Lord, like show me the gain, show me how far I've come. So what I also realized when you're doing that, there's like a spiritual aspect to it that I'll offer up just for the crowd as a general idea, a hypothesis, shall we say. If I spend time constantly feeling like there's lack, well, then basically the joy that's inside of me is getting robbed. And yet, and I'm sure that my enemy hates this when I'm going to say it out loud, when I shift gears and move over to the gap and say, yeah, but God, look how far we've come. Look at what we have. Look at what we've done. Yeah, we still have things that we want to do. It's not diminishing where I want to go ahead of time. But when I shift gears and look back and be like, oh my gosh, I dare to say there is a spiritual component in that where I am overcoming my enemy and declaring. Now I do this myself. I'll declare these things out loud. And then it puts my enemy on notice that like, no, you are not going to rob me again today. I'm going to walk in the things that God's already shown me. And by the way, that includes all the stuff that I've already done to come to be right here in this minute on, let's see. So we're recording on August 31st, 2023. And it was early this morning being like, go. And there was so much power in that today, Ray. There was so much confidence in me in that process of walking my dog and declaring the things that I have already overcome. And it's powerful. I mean, it's like a ripple effect.
Yes.
We always laugh at that because that's the name of the business. It's called the ripple effect. Because I believe as wives and moms and as people, wherever we go, whatever we do, it has a ripple effect and it makes a difference for like 1,000 generations to come.
100% agreed. And, just to stay on the spiritual wavelength for just a moment, this looking at the gain instead of the gap, looking at what we have, it's us giving testimony to what has been given to us. The work of the enemy is cast down by the word of our testimony and the blood of the Lamb.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So for those of you who have ears to hear that, hear it. And those who don't,
that's okay.
It's okay. It'll come to you.
Yeah. The confidence and walking in that is really spectacular because it helped to, here's what my typical day looks like. Let me just be super honest about it. I'm a doer. You might know this about me. So I might wake up in the middle of the night with a checklist of things that I need to do, or if I don't wake up in the middle of the night, because that does happen to be often, I will wake up most mornings with an immediate thought of I have anywhere from 20 to 100 things to do, and yet there's no way I could possibly get that. Although I trick myself regularly and say, but I totally can. I can do all this stuff. But
today's the day. It's gonna happen.
Get out of my way. I'm on a rampage today. I'm getting it all done. And that doesn't ever happen. But that process of walking and praying for me helps not only to recalibrate my mind, but it also helps recalibrate my day and my priorities, because I'm always asking, God, what are like the 1 to 3 things, no more, that I got to get done today? And it helps to take me from like the top of the funnel where there's 100 things I might think of in any given day. So this, I don't know if it's always the same for men, but it is common for women who are wives and mothers, and they work and do all these kinds of things. We have this running list of all these things we want to do, and then we feel bad about not doing all the things that we want to do, and that causes us to stop doing the things that we're supposed to do, right?
Yeah, that
If I
sounds familiar to me as a man. I can test.
take the top of the funnel and narrow it down to just get focused on these couple things that have to get done. I still might aspire to do the 20, but I'm gonna whittle it down almost every day and just say, nope, this is what's the priority. And it's also, I have such a higher success rate when I do that. It's kind of funny to me.
Yeah, it's funny how.
Yeah.
Love that. So, Anita, if anybody watching or listening feels like they want to reach out and connect with you because they resonate with the work you're doing, how do they do that?
So the best way is to probably head on over to my website. It's called therippleeffect.net. I wrote and published a book this year. It's called The 6-Step Blueprint. If somebody was looking to take their specialized knowledge and turn that into a consulting business, I walk through that, and you can have that for free. That's my gift to you, to be able to get started and kind of see what it's all about. I also have a free masterclass that's coming up on, the next one's coming up on September 14th, because what I love to do is come alongside other women and just help them right where they're at. And so I've started a process of, on a monthly basis, offering a free masterclass to basically help them break down, just start the journey of breaking down, where you're at and what are your next steps. Because don't we know, Ray, like in our online space, it's noisy and it's kind of confusing. Yeah. And we hear a lot of like that hockey stick mentality of like, I made $1 million overnight. And that's never the way it happens. Let's just be clear. There's always a lot of work behind those launches that say I did everything overnight. It never, yeah. Let me just dispel that myth. It never works that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Overnight success that took 10 years.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Ray, I just also want to thank you for everything that you do every single day, all over social, inside the mastermind, outside the mastermind. You are an incredible servant, and you give generously of your content, of your perspective, of your thoughts. You're so incredible. You're such a great champion for people. And I just want to honor that in you today. Yeah, you bet.